of not being here, that kind of stuff, but it's kind of been drawn out. And tonight we're going to finish that up, and then I don't know, maybe, here in a couple of weeks, I can come up with something new. So, but tonight, the first question I want to ask you guys is, what do you think, or what do you feel is the biggest threat to the church in today's world? Mark put that right in my leaning spot. So, what do you think is the biggest threat to the church today? I know everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's got a thought.
I don't know the right word to say it, but it's the worst problem with the church today is not caring anymore.
Okay. All right. Not caring anymore.
That same thing I was thinking, and I didn't know how to express my thoughts either.
Okay. All right. Not caring.
There's a word for it if I could think of it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm trying to think of another way to say it or spin it. Maybe indifference. Okay. Indifference.
The devil trying to attack from you not to go to church.
Okay.
From the church.
All right. So the devil trying to attack you, trying to keep you from coming to church. Well, he does that in a lot of different ways. COVID was probably the biggest thing we've ever experienced in that sense, as far as actually keeping us away from church. Priorities, okay. Okay, all right. So Haley says priorities. A lot of times, and I can sure relate, as families, young kids, you guys don't even know. Wait till they get in high school. It's just a blur. But your kids are so busy, and they're pressed to be involved in everything, and you kind of feel like you want them involved in everything. And so you go and you run, and I know with in volleyball, or in the fall, Adley was playing volleyball, Briggs was playing football. So Monday night we were at the school. Tuesday night, if it was a home high school volleyball game, we were at the school because we wanted to be there to support the girls. Wednesday night we were at church, barely, but we were here. Thursday night, yeah, we didn't really have to do anything. Thank goodness Adley wasn't cheering or she didn't play football, because that would have made one more night. And then Friday night was football. And by Saturday, I'm working, catching up on all the stuff I didn't get done because I was busy going to ball games during the week. And on Sunday, I'm wore out. I can't even focus in church. I can't even concentrate. And when your kids are little, it starts then, and then it just kind of gets worse. So yeah, priorities. We had to, with Briggs, when he was about, I think he was about 6th grade, 7th grade, we're like, all right, we got to trim the fat here. We can't go to everything. And so we're like, we have stuff at church, stuff with youth group, that kind of stuff. That's fixed. That's not changing. Now then, you can participate in other things that fit around that, but that's not changing. So, but it's easy to get into that trap. What else? What else do you guys think is a big threat?
Brent, I think I'd say liberalism.
Okay.
And that leads to aggressive nature.
Okay. All right. So Mark says liberalism. So as far as liberalism, what all stuff comes in with that? What all stuff is tied with liberalism? A progressive nature in the church. Do what? Okay. All right, a woke society. This society is really driving, how we react to things now. How we used to, the church kind of drove how people reacted. You go back before my time, and people kind of reacted to situations by how the church responded, or how the church felt about things. And now it's society tells us how to react, and that's slowly creeping into our church as well. What other stuff might come with liberalism?
The biggest threat to the church is me and you and everyone in this auditorium.
Okay.
How we hang on and what we do and how faithful we are. Like you said, priorities, okay, we all got them. That's the way it is. They had them back Jesus' day. We're the threat to we can be the biggest threat to the church.
Okay.
When we get lax and are human, I guess.
Okay. All right. So Patsy says that you and I, can be the biggest threat to the church. We get lax in our worship, in our study, in our prayer, in our faith. We can be a problem. Kind of answers my next question, but to an extent. So, we talked about some of the things that are a threat to the church. Who is a threat to the church? Besides ourselves. The devil, okay. Satan. Okay. What you see, what you hear, I guess from your whatever entertainment vice you have, whether it's television, social media, radio, the company you keep. I want to say, I'm with Patsy on it. I think at the end of the day, there is really only one threat to the church. There's only one real threat, and it's in the church, and it's us. It's me, it's you. We're the biggest threat to the church. And it kind of goes along with what everybody else said. And raise your hand, shout out, or whatever if you want to disagree with me. That's fine, we can talk it out. But I thought Mark was raising his hand, but he did that. He raised his hand like that, and my heart stopped for just a second. I was like, I didn't mean it. No, raise your hand, say something if you disagree. But I think you and I are the biggest threat to the church. There's, different people will say different things. Some people may say, politicians are the biggest threat to the church. A social group may be the biggest threat to the church. We can kind of keep all that stuff out. This church can always exist. It doesn't matter what laws are ever passed. If they say you can't have church during COVID, we can still find a way to have church, can't we? We can still find a way. This church, this group of people is always going to exist. As long as we're part of it. So I think we are the biggest problem in the church, and it goes back to our priorities. Most of the stuff you guys mentioned were things that we have to do with us, have to do with me. Our priorities, the way we react to issues, liberalism, progressive natures. and stuff. So all that comes down to one thing, one word. Can anybody guess what that is? When we're talking about me? Selfishness, isn't it? I think and I believe selfishness is what's behind the liberal movements in the church. It's what I want. It's how I want services to be. It's how we want to be perceived. That all comes down to selfishness. Your priorities are, that's all about me. It's what I want. You know, when I'm busy chasing my kids, and I've been there, done that, I'm busy chasing my kids, I'm too tired to go to church, or I'm too tired to go to a youth function, and it's because I was being selfish with my time. I was being selfish with my kids. I had them doing what I wanted them to do, not what God wanted them to do. Because let's face it, as parents, whenever it comes to sports and those types of things, you know, it's not typically what the kids want to do. It's what we would like for them to do, especially when they're little. So it's a selfish nature. In James 3:16, it says, "For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice." What do you guys think about that verse?
Read that again.
For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. Y'all agree with that?
But when everybody's selfish, you got a pretty good clash going on.
Okay.
I want what I want, you want what you want, what I want, you don't want, what you want, I don't want. So it talks about confusion, it's a clash.
Okay. So Mark says when everybody's selfish, everybody's saying, I want what I want, and this other guy's saying, I want what I want, and it's total confusion. It's total chaos all the time. We have a perfect example of that, don't we? And it's right outside our doors. It's right outside in the world. If you watch the news at all, and I don't, about every 3 days, I'll get on my phone and I'll flip on a news deal. And about half of it is somebody said something that hurt somebody's feelings. And I just kind of scroll past those, and I mainly want to know what markets are doing, or Russia is doing, or China is doing, and I don't know that I even know anymore after I look at the news. Most of the time I don't. I'm still guessing at it, but we can see that chaos, can't we? It's just such chaos out there. We have a whole generation. You know, you look around our church, and I mean, you can look around in here, and you guys, the CJ and Haley, are the youngest people in here. And they're just about the youngest people in our church. And I'm not much older than them, maybe a day or two. But below them, we have a whole generation. You know, my sister's 40, my little sister, and they go to South Plains, and they're in the young adult class, which I don't know, that should be probably the mid-adult class by now, but they're in the young adult class, and it's 40-year-olds and up. There's nobody in their 30s coming to church. We have a whole generation of kids, and now we're starting on a second generation that are narcissists. We have a whole generation that all they can think about is me. And that's all they've been told from the time they were little, is what's important to you is what matters. And so they're raised that way, and that's the way they are. I know some of them well. You know, I have relatives that are young, you know, in their 20s and in their 30s. I mean, it's their way of thinking is so far off that, and everything about them and what makes them feel good. And I'm not telling you guys anything y'all don't know, because y'all see it and y'all hear about it in the news and all that. But it's just total chaos because everybody is selfish. Everybody wants what they want. So do we struggle with selfishness on our own within the church? Does anybody struggle with that? I'll tell you, I do. I do. I'm not as bad as not as much as I used to be. I've kind of become more of a live and let live kind of guy. But when I was younger, if I thought it needed to be said, I was going to say it, and I didn't care about the consequence. And that was selfish of me. So what ways are we selfish? What ways do we find ourselves being selfish within the church? Now, I want to kind of identify some of these things, because if we don't talk about them and we don't actually identify them, then we don't really have a benchmark to say, hey, start here and go here. These are the problems we need to fix. And it can be something you struggle with. It can be something that you've seen. It doesn't have to be something you struggle with. I just tell you what I struggle with, because that's all I really pay attention to is what I'm doing. But what are some things we tend to be selfish about within our church, among our brothers and sisters? Okay, our time. I don't know if anybody else is guilty of that, but I am. Selfish with our time. I think my time is really precious. And I tend to measure everything in time. How long did it take me to do this? How long does it take me to do that? How much time do I have left? That type of thing. That's just me. Not everybody's that way. I know some people that time means nothing to them. Time means everything to me. If I'm going to do a project, I'm going to see how long it takes me to do it, how quick I can finish it, and because it saves time. So whenever it comes to time, sometimes I can be real selfish with my time. Thank you, Stephen. What else?
I think people are getting old and die out, and the younger people are not replacing those people that's dying, so it just doesn't grow.
Okay. All right.
We have that trouble right here, and people moving.
Okay.
Just, I don't know, the younger generation is just not what we grew out and learned.
Okay. So, Johnny, in essence, saying, you know, as people get older, we don't have younger ones stepping up and stepping in and filling those shoes.
I can tell you this, from almost the beginning of time, older people have said the younger people are pitiful, they're terrible. Go back, read history and see what it says. They don't think like us. They have to get older till when you start learning things. You can read back in Socrates' time, they were saying the same thing about young people, they're worthless, you know, but they grow up, and it's our place to see, show them what they can learn.
Okay. All right. So Patsy has a good point. And I agree with you. You know, I kind of start sounding like my dad. You get me talking about these younger people, and my in-laws and my nephews and all that, and I start sounding like my dad, you know. We all, I guess, kind of progressed to that point at some time, but, you know, those kids are the worst ever, you know. There's never been kids as bad as them, when his dad actually probably said that about him, you know, in his generation. And so that's never really changed. But the point Patsy, I think, was really trying to make is whenever those kids do grow up, we've got to be there to guide them, and we've got to be there to help them. Okay, we can't write them off, can we? And we can't be, you know, and in essence, that's being selfless, you know, being willing to help. No, yeah, it's apparently it's frowned upon. No smothering kids. That's what Patsy said. No smothering kids. So, anybody have anything else?
Maybe feeling judged by others and then turn around and be judgmental of being judgmental, you know, maybe
Okay.
feeling that way.
All right.
You know,
So,
like, well, I feel like I'm not good enough to do this in the church, but they should have done this, you know, like it's kind of a
right. Okay. So hey, this is kind of being judged, kind of, but being judgmental at the same time. That kind of stuff can become a vicious cycle where you just kind of get wrapped up in it and you don't know, you know, really how to get out of it.
But too many people, they don't want to look at what the Bible says about things like having, like Mark said the other day about women elders and music in the church and all that. They don't want to see what the Bible says. They just want to do what they want to do.
Okay.
That's what the church has always struggled with.
Yeah.
Is, well, if they're not getting something out of this congregation or that congregation, they seek elsewhere. They struggle with their worship. But sometimes we struggle with our worship and who we worship instead of what am I getting out of it.
Right. So, Amy and CJ both had good points. Amy said, you know, a lot of times we get so selfish about church that we want to change it. We want to, you know, I want, you know, women deacons, and I want women to be able to lead singing, and I want women to be able to do that kind of stuff. And I get so selfish about it that I'm going to fight about it, and I'm going to push it until I get it. And you get enough people that think the same way, and next thing you know, you got a church that's doing that. CJ's scenario, he said, people come to church and they say, you know, this church doesn't really provide what I want, and so I'm going to go to a different church, try something else. And they go to that church doesn't really provide what I want, so I'm going to go to a different church.
The problem with that, you only get out of going to church what you put into it.
Okay, exactly. So I had the same conversation with a family member a year and a half. It was after COVID. Their church, they'd been attending, their church had closed. They were not happy about it. It hadn't opened back up. When it did, there was a big deal about masks, and there's a big deal about vaccines, and you had to reserve a seat, and they only allow 50% and all this stuff. So they're really frustrated. Understandable. So they're like, we're going to go visit some other churches. So they go visit this church over here. Oh, they don't really have a little kids program that we like. Okay. Go over here. They don't really have a youth program we like. Okay. Go to this church over here. I don't like their adult Bible classes. They don't have anything for young adults. So I said, well, what are you going to do then? Well, I don't know. I guess we'll just do online church for a little while and and maybe try some other places, see what happens. I said, well, I disagree with that. And I said, I feel you find a church where the people are loving, caring, it's a warm congregation. There may be something you don't love about it, but I said, go try a church for a little while. And if you feel like you fit in, and that's the kind of family you want to be with, then you go make that church what you wanted it to be. You go create that children's program, that young adult program, that youth program. You go do that. Don't leave it to them to serve you. They just had a totally selfish way of looking at it. So that's a good point. So I had 4 things. I had time. I had people. We get selfish with our people, don't we? We get selfish with our family, maybe our friends, that type of stuff. We get selfish with our money sometimes. I think that's just human nature. We work hard for our money, so we get a little tight-fisted. And our opinions. I think we get real selfish about our opinions. And I would guess, when it comes to opinions, I would guess that if I gave everybody a pen and paper and I said, write down 3 things you wish was different about your congregation, everybody in here would write down something different. Nobody would have the same thing, because we all have different opinions, don't we? On the plus side, that's great. That's what makes us great. Our differences is what makes us great, in our opinions. I've talked to elders before, men that had previously served as elders, and anybody that's ever served as an elder will tell you the hardest thing about being an elder is dealing with people and their opinions. Because so many times we let our opinions override everything, override the Bible, override, what's right and what's wrong, and because it's what we feel and we're convicted that is right. So we've talked a little bit about how it affects the church. So real quick, how does it affect our personal relationships? How does selfishness affect our personal relationships?
Well, like you read in James, where there's selfish ambition, you will find disorder and every evil practice.
Okay.
So, you name it.
All right. So disorder and every evil practice. Okay. What else? Okay. So it's hard to truly love like Christ loved when you're only worried about yourself. What else? I'm not texting, just FYI. I was looking up a verse, so. I'd read a verse earlier or yesterday, and now I can't remember what it was, but it's over in Proverbs somewhere, and it says a selfish man essentially is a lonely man. And I agree with that. Can you ever get close to somebody if you're only worried about yourself? You can't, can you? You can't get close to anybody. I know that some people, it's like selfishness isn't their driving force. It isn't something they really struggle with. I know people that are just, big time givers. And then there's some people that they really struggle with it. People that really struggle with it and have no guidance or whatever, they're lonely people. You can't get close to somebody if you're only worried about yourself. Selfishness tends to drive people away, and we tend to feel lonely. And we tend to say and do things and not care about the consequences. And it's the same way with our relationship with God. I've got like 2 more pages of notes, so I'm going to speed up just a little. I guess I should have split this into 2. But in the same way it affects our relationship with God. It drives a wedge in there, doesn't it? We cannot be close to God if we're being selfish. We can't follow God's will. And ultimately, in my opinion, pure selfishness shows a lack of faith. Shows a lack of faith in God, a lack of faith in your brother and sister in Christ. So, talk about driving this wedge. When we talk about selfishness, I got to thinking about Matthew 19:20 through 25. It's a story about the rich young ruler. He comes to Jesus, says, "Hey, what do I have to do to be saved?" And Jesus said, "Hey, this, and this." He said, "I've done all these things. I've kept all the commandments. I am without blame." And this is what Jesus says. "If you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions, give to the poor, you'll have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me." When the young man heard this, he went away sad because he had great wealth. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Truly I tell you, it's hard for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of heaven." And we'll talk a little more about the rest of that passage here in just a minute. But he wasn't willing to give up what he had, was he? He had worked hard. He had hoarded all this. And it was his. And he just wasn't willing to give that up. And how many times do we do that with our things, with the things we hoard, whether it's our time or our people, our energy, our effort, whatever it is? Sometimes we've worked hard to accumulate this, but we don't want to give it up. There's one thing, well, I'm going to come back to that if I have time. So, over in Galatians 5:13 through 23, says, "You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge in the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one commandment: love your neighbor as yourself." Now, there's nothing about selfishness that can coexist with loving your neighbor as yourself, is there? There's nothing. There's those two can't go together. "If you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other." And I think we've all seen that. We've all seen that in the world. We've all seen that in other churches. If they're arguing and there's total dissent, isn't it? That's all it is. It's just doing what you want. "The acts of the flesh are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition." Right in the middle. It's like right in the middle of all this stuff. "Dissensions, factions, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. And I warn you, as I did before, those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God." Or kingdom of, it says God. Okay. It's selfish ambitions, like right up there in the middle. Like all of us, we can take all those others out, and it's like, we can just check them off, can't we? Just, and then you get right about the middle, and you're like, ooh, can I really check that one off? I don't know. If I really look at myself, can I really check that one off? And what gets me, I guess what I guess is profound to me is he says it's obvious. And I'm like, if it's obvious, why are we doing it? If it's obvious, why am I doing it? Why am I hurting the church? So we move on, and later in Galatians, in the next verse, he starts talking about the fruit of the Spirit. And selfishness is nowhere in there. But then he goes on to talk about, since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking, and envying each other. And over in Romans 8:5-9, it talks about the flesh again. It's talking about the flesh over there. And if we live by the flesh, there's no relationship with God. And as long as we're being selfish, we're living by the flesh. Now, the only way to shed that selfishness is to live in the Spirit. So, one last verse, and then we can visit a little bit if we want. One last verse, though, because it is human nature, right, to be selfish. That is like, so if you just grew up in the wild, let's say you're Mowgli, whatever, from the Jungle Book. You grow up in the wild, all right? Your human nature is going to be to take care of yourself, right? Your human nature is going to be to feed yourself, to survive, and you're going to fight anybody else. But your human nature is also going to be, you're going to develop to a point that I want what I want, and I'm not going to let anybody else stop me. But there's only one way to avoid that human nature, and I think this is something we really, we can all agree on, but I think it's something we can really work at to become one, to be united as Christians. In Matthew 19:26 says, "Who then can be saved?" Jesus looked at them and said, "With man this is impossible. With God all things are possible." So fighting selfishness on our own is impossible. It's impossible. It's human nature. It's who we are. It's in us. It may even be the greatest cause for us to sin, or the biggest reason we do, because it's what I want. But the only way we can break away from that, the only way we can really improve our relationship with God, improve our relationship with each other, strengthen our church, is to put aside selfishness and walk with God. We need to be studying, we need to be praying, we need to spend time together, etc. We have just a minute or two if anybody wants any comments. Kind of had to rush through my favorite part of the whole thing. So, yes, sir.
We've got a building here that's got a lot of things in it. Got a lot of blank spaces. And that's kind of disheartening in a way, but it's not always disheartening. We're all the people that used to be here. They all died to heaven, thousands of them. And that because they were Christians. Now we got the blank seats, we can fill them up again. But the reason they're empty is because all of those good people lived their lives serving God.
Okay.
And don't look at the building as though it's so bad, but it is bad. But yet, it was a good thing that sent all these people to heaven.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that point, Rex. You know, a lot of times we look at our empty building and it's sad and depressing, and there's people we miss. But Rex says, hey, you know, we should be happy our building's emptying out, because a lot of these people that have emptied out, that have left, they've gone on to be with Christ. You know, they're moving on to a better place. So I appreciate that, Rex. I just want to encourage you, as you know, kind of go out from here, be thinking about what you can do for your neighbor. Be thinking about what you can do for your fellow Christian, your brother and sister in Christ. Be thinking, you know, how can I serve somebody else? And be thinking about how can I serve God? And am I serving God to the fullest? So, all right, I appreciate everybody's time. I'll let you guys get out of here. Yeah.
But if you're doing it for me and I'm doing it for you, we're still both okay.
Okay. So Jody's point was, you know, in marriage you hear people say it's 50-50. Well, it's not. Jody says it's 100, you know, each of you have to give 110% all the time. And because there may be a day that one of you can't give 110%. And well, in the church is the same way. We all need to be giving 110% all the time. And that way, when our neighbor is down, when our brother or sister is down, then we can lift them up. So I appreciate that. I think that was my late alarm going off. Thank y'all for being here.